Hey guys, tonight we're staring at the moon, but not the dusty crater-pocked rock you learned about in science class. No, tonight we're drifting back hundreds of years to ancient China, where scholars, poets, and philosophers looked up at the same glowing orb and saw something very different. To them, the moon wasn't just hanging up there like a lonely lamp. It was a mirror, a literal, polished bronze mirror floating above your head, reflecting not just light, but thoughts, emotions, secrets. You probably won't survive this version of astronomy with your modern logic intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me your current location and what time it is right now where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history show travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie flat on your back, stars above, the air cooling against your skin as the moon begins its slow climb through the night. But imagine this. Instead of seeing it as a cold sphere of rock lit by reflected sunlight, you believe it's a massive circular mirror, bronze, not silver, because that's what the best mirrors were made from in ancient China. You've polished one before, right? Rubbed it with oil, buffed it with silk, and watched your own blurry reflection sharpen into view. Now stretch that image across the sky. That's what early Chinese thinkers believed they were seeing, a heavenly looking glass. Some Han Dynasty scholars went even further. They imagined that the moon didn't just reflect light, it revealed truths. You could look into it and see the past, or the future, or your ancestor giving you that disapproving look for forgetting the family incense again. The lunar surface in their minds was a kind of truth scanner. Not that it was entirely flattering, like those mirrors that show every pore you didn't know you had. The notion wasn't limited to a single school of thought either. Confucian court officials, Taoist mystics, even some early folktale weavers all toyed with the idea of a sky mirror. And they weren't just being poetic. Bronze mirrors were prized in ancient China. They were spiritual tools, heirlooms, diplomatic gifts. Possessing one was a status symbol. They reflected not just your face, but your place in the world. So if mirrors had power down here, why wouldn't the biggest one be up there? You walk past a carved stone stele, and on it are etchings of the moon. Perfect circles, often decorated with rays, sometimes with dragons or phoenixes curled around them. The word used in old texts for mirror, jing, often appears in lunar poetry. Not always figurative. Some believe the sky had been forged, just like bronze was, and the moon was its crowning polish. Here's a fun and slightly ridiculous tidbit. One philosopher proposed that the moon was actually hung in the sky by a celestial rope. Not gravity, not orbits, just rope. It swung gently with the movement of the heavens, and if the gods ever got clumsy, it might fall. So yes, sleep tight. There's still scholarly debate on where exactly this mirror theory originated. Some say it stems from the Zhou dynasty's ritual texts, where bronze mirrors were tied to cosmological diagrams. Others claim it was a Taoist import, blending mysticism with a bit of celestial feng shui. And then there's the fringe crowd who swear it was all based on a misunderstanding of an eclipse, that the darkened moon must have flipped around to its non-reflective side. Kind of like turning your mirror over. Awkward. You turn your head slightly, and suddenly, you're in a cluttered scholar's study. Scrolls stacked like pancakes, a bronze mirror hanging from a silk cord. It's old, the surface mottled, but it still glints in the candlelight. The scholar is mumbling something about the divine likeness of heaven and dipping a brush into ink. He's writing a poem, yes, another one, about the moon's gaze. He says it watches him while he sleeps. Honestly, kind of creepy, but it's comforting too, like being observed by something ancient, steady, polished, perfect. By the Tang Dynasty, this mirror in the sky idea was full-blown mainstream. Poets like Li Bai would stare at the moon and compare it to their lost loves, distant homes, and more than once, their own mortality. What I see, one wrote, is not the moon, but myself trapped in its brightness. Drama level, 100. But again, the mirror wasn't just reflective. It was revelatory. And if you really want to test the metaphor, consider this. In some stories, people use the moon to communicate. Not like a phone, don't get too excited. But if you looked into a certain kind of bronze mirror at the right hour under moonlight, you might see someone else, someone far away, doing the same. Ancient FaceTime, sort of. But without the awkward freeze frames or forgetting you're muted. Of course, not everyone was convinced. Some skeptical minds insisted that the moon's reflective quality was just an illusion caused by atmospheric moisture. Others said it was made of a kind of transparent jade, not bronze. The debate never really ended. Historians still argue whether early Chinese moon mirror beliefs were metaphor, myth, or a misplaced attempt at astronomy. But the result? Centuries of writings, rituals, and late-night reflections, literally and spiritually, on the round, glowing mirror in the sky. You stretch out your arms as if you could touch it. The moon stares back, as polished and patient as ever. You squint up at the moon, and for a moment, it seems to shimmer, not just with light, but with attitude. It's as if it's checking you out, arching an eyebrow, not judging exactly, just noticing. And that wouldn't be strange at all if you were a Tang Dynasty scholar, because to them, the moon wasn't just a big heavenly rock. No, it was possibly a cosmic vanity, a divine compact mirror drifting silently overhead, not just reflecting Earth, but reflecting you, your inner thoughts, your spiritual hygiene, and possibly that spinach in your teeth. Imagine stepping into the quiet courtyard of a Tang poet's home. It's late. Crickets chirp. A breeze lifts the silk curtain as he stares at the moon like it owes him rent. Not because he's romantic, not because he's lonely. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly because the moon, to him, is a personal mirror. One that peeks into the soul and maybe, if it's in a good mood, shows you who you truly are. If that's not unnerving enough, remember this is happening during a dynasty that also believed mirrors could trap ghosts. So yes, soul-scanning moon, perfectly reasonable. By now, bronze mirrors were more than tools. They were talismans. People didn't just use them to fix their hair. They used them to ward off evil, reflect sunlight in ceremonies, and sometimes to decipher dreams. If your bronze mirror suddenly clouded or spotted, it might mean a bad omen. Now scale that up. A dim or clouded moon, disaster incoming, famine, invasion, or just the emperor waking up in a bad mood and banning tea again. You tiptoe through Tang Dynasty records and discover odd entries. Moon appears dull, sacrifices offered. Moon sharply clear, good harvest expected. There was a logic to this cosmic skincare routine. If the moon looked healthy, the empire was balanced. If the moon looked like it needed exfoliating, time to panic. And yes, it gets weirder. One school of thought proposed that the moon's changing phases were not simply a matter of shadow and sunlight, but a kind of celestial cleansing ritual, like the moon was literally giving itself a facial every month. Waning was the removal of impurities. Waxing, restoration of radiance. The full moon, the divine highlighter. Historians still argue whether this interpretation was metaphorical, spiritual, or just an early attempt to justify howling at the sky during awkward social phases. You run your fingers over the smooth surface of an ancient bronze mirror. Still cool, still glowing faintly from years of moon rituals. Some were inscribed with cosmological symbols, others had little poems on the back. One reads, "What you seek is not in light, but in your reflection." Deep, also mildly passive-aggressive. But here's the thing. They didn't just stop at philosophy. People actually tried to use the moon, like spiritually use it. Taoist monks would gather during full moons to bathe in the light. Not literally scrub themselves under moonbeams, although no one's stopping them, but sit or stand still in the open, allowing the light to touch them in quiet, meditative moments. The belief that moonlight carried purity, that it cleared internal blockages, maybe not so different from a Sunday facial, really. You glance at an old scroll spread out on lacquered wood. There's a tiny painted figure kneeling under a full moon, his palms open. Above him, a mirrored circle, delicate rays etched in gold. Some believed if you concentrated hard enough during these rituals, you could receive messages. Not from the gods necessarily, more like divine nudges, life advice. Maybe a stern moonbeam whispering, "Don't text your ex." Meanwhile, high society picked up on the moon's reflective trend too. Wealthy families began incorporating moon viewing pavilions in their gardens. Imagine elegant stone terraces, shallow pools designed to double the moon's image, and scholars reclining with cups of plum wine talking about how the moon reminded them of their childhood dog, or the moral decay of politics, or their favorite noodles, all equally valid. You might be thinking, okay, but how does this connect to actual science? Well, it doesn't. Not really. This was pre-telescope, pre-gravity, pre-everything, you know. But they weren't trying to measure craters. They were using the moon to measure themselves. It was less about physics, more about self-inquiry, therapy via lunar gaze. Call it astro-reflection. Of course, not everyone was convinced. Some skeptics of the era dismissed moon gazing as woo-woo nonsense. One snarky philosopher wrote that anyone who saw truth in the moon was just sleep-deprived and needed a proper bed. Rude, but relatable. Still, the moon's role as a personality check stuck. A well-known belief was that if you felt off during a full moon, it meant the moon was showing you your flaws. People would fast during full moons to cleanse themselves or offer small mirror-shaped cakes to honor the sky. Yes, you read that right. Mirror cakes, possibly the ancestor of the moon cake. Eat your reflection. Symbolism is tasty. By now, you might be lying there thinking, this is all very reflective, but surely someone still thought the moon was a UFO, right? That's coming, but not just yet. First, we have to watch the moon get moodier, more symbolic, less a light bulb, more a cosmic therapist. So you stare at the sky. The moon is waxing, a soft glow bleeding into the night. You imagine it as a great bronze disk, tarnished slightly, polished by stars. Somewhere, a poet sighs. Somewhere, A monk breathes in silence. And you're lying there, a little more aware of your soul than you were 10 minutes ago. Try not to blink. The mirror's watching. You blink slowly and find yourself in the cool stone courtyard of a Taoist temple tucked high on a misty mountainside, far from the hum of anything modern. Lanterns flicker, pine branches whisper, and above it all, the moon, round, pale, and strangely powerful, spills its light over the tiled roofs like milk poured from a silver ladle. Except, of course, you already know it's not silver, it's bronze, and it's watching. Now you'd think the monks here would be sleeping, or maybe sipping tea while offering deep reflections on existence. But no. Some of them are standing barefoot in the moonlight, arms raised slightly, chests open to the sky. They're not posing, they're bathing. This is a moon bath, a very real ritual performed by Taoist practitioners, especially during the full moon. The belief was that lunar rays could purify your internal energy channels, scrub your aura, and calm the fire of worldly distractions. Essentially, moonlight as detergent for your soul. You might chuckle at the idea now, but remember, people still charge crystals under full moons today, so let's not get too smug. The Taoists believed the moon held yin energy, cool, receptive, quiet, the ideal counterpart to the sun's hot, aggressive yang. By aligning yourself with the moon, you could rebalance your internal elements. And if you did it just right, you wouldn't just feel better. You might extend your life, or levitate, or at the very least, impress someone at your next incense party. As you step softly through the temple garden, you notice shallow reflecting pools, small rectangles of water placed specifically to double the moon's image. These weren't just for aesthetics. Some monks believed gazing into the reflected moon gave deeper insight than looking at it directly. Like how sometimes you spot your weirdest facial expressions in car mirrors, not selfies. Reflections reveal things you don't expect. One elder tells you, in a voice like falling leaves, that the moon reflects not only light, but moral clarity. Look too long, he says, and you'll begin to see your past lives whisper back. A bit intense, but somehow it fits the vibe. You sit with the monks as they chant softly. A rhythmic pulse flows around you, and though you don't understand the words, the tone burrows into your bones. Each syllable aligns with breath. Each pause seems to mirror the stillness of the moon above. They say moonlight feeds the jing, the vital essence stored deep in your body. No one really explains how, but that doesn't stop them from doing it with full commitment. Meanwhile, in a dusty library below the temple, you stumble across a curious scroll. It describes the lunar elixir practice, a technique where you're supposed to breathe in moonlight through your palms and exhale sorrow through your toes. You try it. You look a bit silly, but strangely, you do feel lighter. This practice wasn't isolated to hermits and mystics. During the Tang and Song dynasties, even regular folks participated in what we might call moon appreciation nights. People would gather outside, drink tea, compose poetry, and quietly absorb moonlight like human-sized solar panels of emotion. And yes, some of them believed this light could improve complexion, fertility, and digestion. Honestly, that's better marketing than most wellness influencers today. There are records of moonlight being collected in bowls of water overnight, then used for face washing. Skin touched by the moon will not age like others, one beauty manual claimed. So if you ever wondered what ancient night serums looked like, they were lunar-infused water and maybe a whisper of orchid sap. Quirkier still, some Taoist sects believed that moonlight could be cooked, literally. They placed ceramic jars of water on rooftops, sealed them for weeks, and called the result yin dew. You weren't supposed to drink it exactly. More like sip it, meditate, then smear a little on your eyelids while reciting soft mantras. The goal? Spiritual clarity, or possibly just very moisturized eyeballs. Historians still argue whether these moonlight practices were symbolic meditation aids or if practitioners truly believed the energy had physiological effects. Maybe it was both. Maybe it didn't matter. When enough people believe something shapes the soul, it begins to act like it does. Even emperors got in on the moon action. Some would schedule moon viewing festivals not just for show, but to align their inner balance before big political decisions. Never sign a treaty in a waning moon, warned one imperial advisor. It will wither before its ink dries. Makes you wonder what phase the moon was in during your last bad breakup, doesn't it? You're guided now into a quiet moon altar room. A small bronze mirror sits atop a black lacquer pedestal, surrounded by lilies and open scrolls. The mirror is positioned so that on the night of the full moon, its surface captures a perfect disk of moonlight, a reflection of a reflection, a mirror gazing into another mirror. In Taoist thought, this created a brief celestial alignment, a portal, some whispered. If you focused hard enough, you might glimpse the divine blueprint of the universe. Or you might just get really sleepy and drop your incense stick. You sit cross-legged. Breathe. Let your gaze soften. The mirror's glow trembles ever so slightly as a breeze drifts through the paper windows. The monks continue their soft chant, and you begin to feel like you're hovering. Not your body exactly, but your awareness, as though the moon has scooped you up and is holding you gently like a bowl of soup. You probably won't levitate. You probably won't unlock the secrets of past lives or turn into an immortal crane. But lying here, under the ancient moon, surrounded by stillness, you do feel a little cleaner inside, like something heavy quietly let go. The moon is still watching, of course, but maybe now it's smiling just a little. The moon hangs heavy now, bright as a signal flare in the velvet sky. You start to wonder, what if it's not just reflecting you, not just polishing your spirit or cleansing your chai? What if it's watching? That's not just late-night paranoia whispering from under the covers. It's a genuine belief held by imperial astrologers in ancient China. To them, the moon might have been far more than a mirror. It might have been a spy. You drift through the shadowed halls of an imperial observatory. It smells like dust, ink, and the sharp tang of anticipation. Robes rustle, brushes scratch against parchment. Outside, the moon glows with unsettling clarity. One court official mutters that it's too round, too present. Another whispers the moon has started rising at the wrong times, not just late or early, but off, slightly tilted, as if it's angling for a better view. You listen to these men of science and superstition argue, and a strange idea surfaces again and again. The moon might not just reflect the emperor's realm, it might be his double, his twin, his heavenly counterpart, assigned by the stars to mirror his moods, his justice, his sins. If the emperor was benevolent, the moon would be bright and full. If he grew cruel or cowardly, it would hide or show a crimson ring. One tale from the late Han period tells of a night when the moon flickered unnaturally. A nobleman wrote in his diary, "The moon was distorted. Surely His Majesty is being imitated." Imitated, not mocked, not insulted, copied. That's right. Some believe the moon could function as a celestial body double for the emperor. If he were assassinated, his soul might retreat to the moon's reflective surface, where it could continue to oversee the world without interference. Practical, in a creepy way. There were even rituals to honor this lunar reflection of the emperor. A bronze mirror would be placed in the palace garden during full moons, aligned perfectly so the reflection of the moon matched a carved image of the emperor's face. If the reflection shimmered or distorted, it was interpreted as a warning. "His rule is fragile," the astrologers would murmur. "His image bends." You imagine being an advisor, handed a report. The moon's reflection no longer matches the sovereign's. Not the kind of thing you want to hear during breakfast. But the theory didn't stop at symbolism. Some fringe records suggest certain dynasties explored the idea that the moon acted as a receiver. Yes, a kind of cosmic surveillance device. Not electronic, of course, but they believed messages, emotions, even political discontent could be picked up by the moon's mirror surface and carried into the heavens, where divine entities, perhaps ancestral emperors, could observe and judge. Now, were there skeptics? Always. One blunt scholar argued that calling the moon a divine informant was like asking your spoon to report your crimes, but that didn't stop others from nervously watching it anyway. Historians still argue whether this was taken literally or as an exaggerated metaphor to keep officials in check. Either way, it worked. One general apparently refused to plot rebellion under moonlight. He feared the moon might betray him. This fear gave rise to what you might call moon diplomacy. Some court decisions were delayed until the moon had waned, just to avoid the full lunar gaze. Secret councils were held underground. Rebels waited for cloudy nights. If you were planning something shady, you wanted the sky dark. The mirror turned away, and the moon naturally became part of official reports. One royal astronomer's log reads, "Moon appears bloated, with shadow near edge." Unsettling. Possible court betrayal incoming. That's a real thing someone wrote down in the archives. You think weather forecasts are dramatic? Try predicting coups via moon puffiness. Here's a quirky twist. During certain dynasties, court artists were tasked with sketching the moon's reflection as seen in palace pools. Not just the moon itself, mind you, but its reflection in water. These sketches were then compared across seasons, across years, to spot subtle changes. Imagine being that artist. No, really, it's a different shimmer this time. It means something. You shuffle through one of these scrolls now, holding it carefully. The ink has faded, but the drawn moon is unmistakable. Round, hovering above tiny mountain silhouettes, its reflection rippling below. And in the margin, someone has written, "The reflection wobbled. The Son of Heaven must beware." Whether this was metaphor or a moon weather report, no one can quite say. You return your gaze skyward. The moon looms silently, calm as ever. But you can't shake the idea that it's storing memories, watching movements, gathering impressions not in words, but in light and shadow. The emperors may be gone, but perhaps their double, their quiet lunar twin, remains, always circling, always reflecting, always remembering. As you lie back again, the moon seems just a little too round, just a little too still. But don't worry, you've been good lately, right? You exhale into the darkness, the night around you thick with silence and that eerie sense that something ancient is pressing close. Watching, yes, but also waiting. The moon hangs high and steady, and you begin to feel its presence less as a glowing disk and more as the lid of something vast, like a pot or a cosmic cooking vessel. And if that sounds strange, welcome to the wonderfully surreal kitchen of early Chinese cosmology, because to certain thinkers, especially during the pre-Qin and Han periods, the moon wasn't just a mirror or a moral auditor. It was cookware. Yes, really. A shimmering heavenly lid sealing the celestial stew that was the sky. You're basically living inside a giant star soup. This idea came from a broader theory of the universe as a kind of inverted bowl or cauldron. Sky above, earth below, stars floating in between like bits of scallion and ginger. The moon? That was the bronze lid. It kept the ingredients balanced. It regulated heat. And on occasion, it overboiled, which could explain a comet or an eclipse. Sudden cosmic burp. You imagine an ancient scholar, robe sleeves rolled up, squinting at the night sky while chewing a sprig of licorice root. He mutters that the stars are thin broth, the planets are spice clumps, and the moon, yes, must be the seal that keeps the flavor in. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic cosmology or if people genuinely believed the heavens could be reduced to a fancy hot pot. There's a wonderful record from a Han Dynasty text that describes the moon as being forged from sky bronze, polished by thunder, and lifted by wind. That's poetic, sure, but also oddly practical, because bronze in those days was considered not just a metal, but a metaphysical substance. It wasn't inert. It could absorb intentions, reflect spiritual energies, and in the right shape, say a mirror or a moon, it could even act as a kind of portal or lid. Quirky detail? In some villages, people would bang actual bronze pots during eclipses. Why? Because they thought the celestial lid was coming loose. The clangs were meant to wake the moon and remind it of its duty. Staying sealed, staying still. That's right. You weren't just observing the eclipse. You were participating in a kind of cosmic maintenance, lunar tech support. Some even believed that if you stared into the full moon during these events and saw it shift or shimmer, it was a sign that the lid was ajar, which meant, brace yourself, the soup of the stars could leak. Interpret that however you like, but to those ancient stargazers, it explained everything from shooting stars to political unrest. You wander now through a dusty observatory, its curved roof built to echo the vault of heaven. Star maps line the walls, but they're not precise charts like you'd find today. Number these are more gastronomic. One scroll pairs constellations with elements of traditional medicine. Another one maps the moon's phases to seasonal recipes, for real. A waxing moon favors sour broth, one line claims. Waning, avoid pickled roots. Your inner nutritionist may be horrified, but your inner poet is absolutely delighted. And then you stumble upon a tale that glows with bronze weirdness. A wandering monk once claimed he had spoken to the moon, or rather, into the moon. He said he found a sacred mirror during a pilgrimage, one that hummed when exposed to moonlight. By placing his ear against it, he could hear a soft bubbling sound, like boiling water, like soup. He insisted that the moon was the final layer in a multi-tiered vessel, and that the stars were actually reflections from deeper layers below. You're not sure what to believe, but the idea that the cosmos is more kitchen than clockwork? Kind of comforting, actually. Back in more formal circles, certain Confucian scholars resisted all this pot imagery. One memorably grumpy essay criticized the soupy superstitions of the ignorant countryside and demanded the moon be viewed strictly as heavenly ornament. But even he admitted that bronze, specifically sky bronze, had symbolic value, and that the moon's consistency, its glow, and its behavior matched the principles of a well-tempered vessel. Even the shape mattered. The roundness of the moon wasn't just pretty, it was essential. Circles in Chinese thought represented harmony, unity, and the cyclical nature of life. So a round moon was not only a lid, it was a seal, a sign that things were balanced. When the moon was full, you were supposed to feel safe, protected, lulled into a sense that everything, above and below, was where it should be. You stand under the sky now, the full moon directly above. For a moment, it's hard not to see it as a lid. Its glow feels solid, heavy even, like you could climb up and tap it with a spoon and hear a low bronze chime echo back. You wonder if that's what those ancient monks imagined during their moon chants. That they weren't calling to a god, but knocking politely on the universe's kitchenware. So next time someone asks you what the moon is made of, skip the cheese, skip the rock dust. Just smile and whisper, "Star soup lid." The moon won't mind. The night feels deeper now, like velvet folded over velvet. You follow a path of stepping stone through dewy grass, led only by the soft pull of moonlight. And just when you think it's going to be another round of monks and metaphors, the shadows part, and a new story stirs in the darkness, etched not in books, but in the luminous patterns on the moon's surface itself. To you, those shadowy patches might look like random craters. Maybe the face of the man in the moon if you're feeling whimsical. But to ancient Chinese sky watchers, those marks told stories. Specifically, the story of a woman who flew too close to the gods and never came down again. Her name? Chang'e. Now you've probably heard her name around the Mid-Autumn Festival, paired with mooncakes and lanterns and a surprising amount of dramatic poetry. But in older Chinese lore, her tale isn't just romantic. It's cautionary, strange, and absolutely lunar. So here's how it goes. Once upon a time, long before moon gazing was trendy, there lived a great archer named Hu Yi, one of those epic hero types who could apparently shoot down anything, including 9 out of 10 suns. Yes, there were 10 suns originally. Things got toasty. As a reward, he was given an elixir of immortality, but he didn't drink it. Instead, he gave it to his wife, Chang'e, for safekeeping. Huge trust move. Only she drank it. Depending on which version you read, she either did it to protect it from thieves, or out of curiosity, or because immortality is a pretty tempting offer on a slow afternoon. Either way, the moment she swallowed the potion, she began to float, up, 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 until she landed on the moon, alone. And there she remains, pale and glowing, forever framed in the surface of the moon, like a reflection trapped inside an ancient bronze mirror. You gaze up now, and suddenly, those dark patches on the moon's face don't look so random anymore. They look like a woman in a flowing robe. Her hair billows, her arms reach out. Maybe she's trying to return. Maybe she's adjusting her celestial Wi-Fi. Historians still argue whether the visual interpretation of Chang'e's figure came before or after the myth. But either way, people have been squinting at the moon and seeing her for centuries. What makes it all more curious is that this myth didn't just float around on its own. It stuck like moonlight on water because it fit. It gave narrative to what people already believed, that the moon was more than a rock, more than a mirror. It was a realm, a prison, a stage, and maybe a kind of divine selfie, because Chang'e wasn't the only one living up there. According to some versions, she's not alone. There's also a white jade rabbit. Yes, really, pounding herbs in a mortar with tiny celestial precision. Some say the rabbit is making the elixir of immortality. Others say it's just extremely committed to skincare. Either way, you'll meet him properly later. For now, you lean closer to the myth, and it leans back. One lesser-known version says that after Chang'e landed on the moon, she tried to call down to Earth using polished bronze mirrors. She would angle them just right, letting moonlight bounce down to specific places, temples, forests, maybe Ho Yi's old house. The light shimmered as if it carried messages, secrets, or apologies. In some Taoist scrolls, it's written that on certain nights, if you held a mirror just right under the full moon and said her name, you might glimpse her face looking back. Not in the glass, but from the moon, like she was peering through. Goosebumps optional. This belief merged beautifully with the idea of the moon as a polished, heavenly mirror. Chang'e's reflection wasn't just metaphorical, it was literal. Her image, embedded in the very surface, turned the moon into both her tomb and her looking glass. Poets obsessed over this. One compared her to a tear suspended in jade. Another described the moon as her mourning face, hiding behind a veil of brightness. Here's a quirky twist. Some old paintings depict Chang'e sitting on a moon-shaped bronze mirror itself, hovering above mountains with long ribbons trailing like comet tails. She looks serene, elegant, deeply lonely, and still, somehow, regal. Not exactly the vibe of someone who guzzled immortality juice on a whim. As you stroll through the moonlit landscape of your imagination, you start to feel the layers of reflection stack up. The moon reflects the earth. The bronze mirror reflects the moon. And inside all that, Chang'e reflects humanity's craving for something higher, something beautiful and unreachable and a little bit tragic. Kind of like the idea of perfection, or trying to eat just one mooncake. Good luck. And if you think this is all just bedtime story fluff, remember, emperors held moon ceremonies specifically in her honor. Offerings were left out, prayers sent up. Women especially connected with her image, her strength, her solitude, her refusal to return. She was a divine feminine ideal long before hashtags tried to define it. Historians, of course, still debate the origin of Chang'e's myth. Some say she evolved from older moon goddesses. Others believe she was a human woman, mythologized into stardust. One theory suggests her story was crafted to explain the dark spots on the moon, like, don't worry, those aren't ominous craters. That's just our tragic space ant doing her thing. You lie back again, watching the sky. The moon, enormous now, feels not just full, but full of someone. And maybe, just maybe, that soft shimmer you see along its edge isn't light at all. Maybe it's silk. Maybe she's still moving. Whatever you believe, the mirror in the sky is no longer empty. It has a face. You blink, and the sky blinks back. The moonlight stretches across your vision like a soft cloth, silvery and slow. But tonight, It doesn't just fall across mountaintops and rooftops. It slips through a paper screen, flickering across the floor of a cluttered workshop. You're inside a forge now, warm and humming, and the scent of metal and soot curls in the air. This is where the mirrors were born. Not the ones in your bathroom. These are the real ones. The ancient bronze ones. The ones that might have whispered to the moon. A man in a rough robe holds up a flat circular disc, still glowing faintly from the fire. It doesn't look like much yet, just a puck of cooled metal. But you watch as it's carried over to a polishing bench where silk cloths and fine ash wait in careful piles. The process is part metallurgy, part alchemy, part obsessive-compulsive cleaning. Bronze mirrors weren't made overnight. You had to cast them, pour molten bronze into carefully carved clay molds, let them cool, then grind and polish the surface until it gleamed like water. And then you added meaning. Inscribed symbols, mantras, dragons, constellations. They weren't just tools, they were talismans, stories, beliefs you could hold in your hand. And here's the part that sends a chill down your spine. Some mirrors were made only for the sky to see. Certain Taoist and courtly sects commissioned mirrors inscribed on the back with sacred or secret messages, not to be read by people, but to be shown to the heavens during rituals. You imagine a priest lifting one toward the full moon, arms trembling slightly. The moon reflects its light into the mirror. The mirror returns a message. Loop complete. One rare mirror recovered from a tomb had etchings of a phoenix facing the moon, alongside symbols that scholars still haven't fully translated. One theory? The markings were designed to reflect specific wavelengths of light, something visible only during a full moon, as if the mirror's message waited for the right moment to reveal itself. Historians still argue whether this was ancient science or accidental genius. Either way, it worked. But let's not forget the other kind of enchantment, straight-up magical inscription. According to lore, certain mirrors had words so potent they could ward off spirits or attract love, depending on the mood. One popular motif was the magic mirror of clarity, said to reflect not your face, but your true nature. Bit risky to keep that on your vanity shelf, but sure. In some moon festivals, people would bring their finest bronze mirrors outside and angle them to catch moonlight. Some swore that if you looked into the mirror through the reflected moonlight, you could see visions, loved ones, future events, maybe even past mistakes replaying like cosmic security footage. There's even a story about a widow who saw her husband's smile return through the mirror years after his death. Whether it was love or lunar lensing is anyone's guess. Back in the forge, you watch as the final layer of polish is applied using nothing more than soft cotton and old peach oil. The mirror hums with potential. One artisan holds it up and murmurs, "This one will catch the rabbit." He's talking about the jade rabbit, of course, but more on that later. What matters here is the belief that these mirrors communicated with the moon. Not figuratively, literally, like two discs spinning in harmony across space and time. Quirk alert! Some mirrors had tiny pinholes cast into their backs. Why? So moonlight could pass through them, creating patterns on the ground like celestial Morse code. Kids would chase the beams, poets would write about them. One verse read, "The moon's eye winks through bronze, heaven breathes beneath my feet." And here's the kicker. A special type of mirror called the transparent bronze mirror existed. Sounds impossible, right? Bronze isn't see-through, But these mirrors were so finely cast and polished that when angled just so in sunlight or moonlight, they appeared to show images through their surfaces. Etched figures would glow as if projected. The trick? A precise curvature and delicate backside engraving. Early holograms, basically. They wowed not just nobility, but skeptics who couldn't explain how solid metal became a ghost screen. You run your fingertips along one now, cool and silent. Its etched patterns shimmer as light dances across them. And for just a moment, you swear the lines twist, shift, show movement. It's probably your imagination. Probably. Unless, of course, the mirror remembers what it was made to reflect. You step out of the workshop. The moon's still high. But now it feels different. Like it knows what you've seen. Like it's searching for the reflection you carry. So be careful with mirrors. Some of them are listening. You shuffle through paper, scrolls by candlelight, half asleep and fully entranced when the unmistakable sound of bureaucracy rustling breaks the silence. Yes, tonight's journey is taking a turn from mystics and mirrors to something altogether more mundane. Paperwork. Glorious, moon-tracking, seal-stamped paperwork. Because while you might dream of ancient sages meditating under the stars, don't forget the unsung heroes of lunar lore. The Han Dynasty clerks with ink-stained sleeves and opinions about moon brightness charts. Imagine being one of these civil servants. It's the year, 121 BCE, give or take. You're hunched over a bamboo desk, forehead lightly sweating, brush twitching in your fingers. Why? Because your job today and every night this week is to record how bright the moon is. Yes, really. You step outside the records hall into a silent courtyard. A small group of officials squint skyward, murmuring things like, tonight's illumination is somewhere between moderately full and enthusiastically pale. One elder insists it's brighter than last night. Another argues that the humidity's distorting it. A third guy is scribbling on a wax tablet like his bonus depends on it. You see, tracking the moon wasn't just a poetic pastime, it was state policy. Han Dynasty officials maintained what were essentially lunar brightness logs. These were used to monitor the heavens for signs of imbalance, political, agricultural, spiritual. A dim moon might signal drought. A red moon could foreshadow rebellion. And a too bright moon? That might mean the emperor was getting a little too ambitious. Calm down, Your Majesty. There's a scroll somewhere in the Imperial Archives with the line, "Full moon appears thin. Border Patrol sent." This was not metaphor. If the moon looked weird, action was taken. Crop schedules were adjusted. Taxes might be delayed. Or in rare cases, a court official would be exiled for misreading the moon's favor. You thought quarterly reports were stressful? And it wasn't just court officials who got into the moon tracking game. Local bureaucrats, way out in the dusty provinces, had their own little systems. Some developed charts that tried to match moonlight intensity with crop success. If moonlight during the planting month had a certain hue, it supposedly meant a rice surplus. If it had a hazy edge, brace for locusts. Historians still argue whether these patterns were superstition, proto-science, or just farmer optimism with paperwork attached. One particularly enthusiastic tax clerk in Luoyang wrote an entire volume correlating lunar glow to household rice debt. His theory? If the moon was dim during harvest season, people were spiritually anxious and less likely to hoard. Therefore, tax collection would be easier. Was he right? Probably not. Was he promoted? Absolutely. Never underestimate the power of a confident moon-based spreadsheet. Meanwhile, back at court, the emperor had his own favorite moon. Interpreters. Some were actual astronomers, others more like vibe consultants with long beards. One was said to predict floods by licking moonlit rocks. Another insisted that only bronze bowls filled with spring water could offer true lunar insight. Did it work? Let's just say the palace drains were regularly reinforced just in case. Quirky fact: certain moon observers believe that changes in brightness weren't caused by clouds or shadows, but by the moon shifting its mood. A cheerful moon glowed cleanly. A sulky one might dull itself out of protest. This made things awkward when wars were declared under unhappy moon readings, but no one wanted to be the guy to suggest otherwise. And so the bureaucracy grew. Charts, diagrams, calendars layered with phases and brightness annotations. Eventually, these records became so thick with data that scholars began arguing over moon cycles the way modern fans argue over plot holes in a long-running fantasy series. In year 8 of Emperor Cheng's reign, the full moon rose one night early, one scholar snarled. That means the tax hike that followed was cosmically invalid. It's all very dramatic, in a calligraphy kind of way. You flip open one dusty record and find a category labeled Moon versus Family Dynamics. No, really. Some officials believe the moon's brightness affected household harmony. Too bright? Expect arguments. Too dim? Expect brooding silence and passive-aggressive tea pouring. One famously grumpy tax assessor delayed his family reunion 2 weeks until the moon was socially appropriate. But amid all the charts and panic, there's also something unexpectedly tender. A small note scrawled in the margin of a moon report from the Eastern Hand period reads, "Tonight's moon resembles my wife's mirror. I fear her illness will worsen." It's the tiniest glimpse of humanity inside the machinery of state. Even under layers of ink and stamps, the moon had personal meaning. You step outside once more. The night is quiet but not still. There's movement in the leaves, in the thoughts of sleeping clerks, in the faint sound of a brush scratching parchment somewhere. The moon above is full tonight, almost suspiciously full. Somewhere, a nervous official is probably logging its intensity. So you lie back and consider. Maybe those records weren't so boring. Maybe tracking the moon was less about predicting disaster and more about staying connected to something larger, something luminous and unpredictable. Something you couldn't tax, but couldn't ignore. Besides, you've already missed 3 forms and 2 rice quotas while staring at it. Don't worry, they'll blame the moon. You close your eyes for just a second, and when you open them, the moon is shifting. Not like moving across the sky shifting, but something weirder. There's a glint, a blink, a pulse in the corner of your eye. You sit up. You stare. You swear it just flickered. Again. Was that movement? Cue the internal monologue. What if it's not a mirror? What if it's a ship? You're not the first person to wonder. Ancient Chinese texts, usually poetic, sometimes bizarre, occasionally describe strange events involving the moon. Glowing visitors, sudden lights, moving shadows. One obscure scroll even mentions a lunar chariot with spokes of flame, which is either ancient metaphor or the first recorded UFO sighting in East Asia. Historians still argue whether these accounts describe supernatural visions, astronomical events, or something more curious hovering at the edge of recorded memory. Let's rewind. Imagine you're a sky watcher in the late Zhou dynasty. You've seen hundreds of moons rise, most of them exactly how they're supposed to, steady, silent, boring. But one night, as you sit by a field, sipping rice wine and contemplating filial piety, the moon flashes, just a flicker. Then some dark shape, glides across its face, slow and smooth. What do? You write a poem, of course, and bury it inside a larger collection titled Something Innocent, like Whispers from the West Wind. That's how most of these lunar oddities survived, hidden inside verses, cloaked in metaphors thick enough to confuse censors and confound historians. You flip through one such anthology now and find this gem. The mirror twitched its eyelid. A shadow blinked back. The stars paused, unsure if they should resume breathing. Sounds suspicious, right? Another line reads, "A fire-ringed bird took rest upon the silver plate." Not bird, not flame. Okay, now you're really leaning in. And here's where it gets deliciously ambiguous. Was the moon always seen as a mirror? Or was the mirror theory invented after people started seeing things they couldn't explain? That's a serious debate in sinology circles. One theory suggests the bronze mirror model helped people reinterpret strange celestial phenomena like glowing spheres or weirdly timed eclipses as something symbolic rather than a threat. Others argue the reverse, that people saw strange things first, then needed a metaphor to file them under. So the mirror wasn't just a lens, it was a cover story. Quirk time. There's an old folk story from the Song dynasty about a boy who stared at the moon too long and fell into a trance. When he woke up, he insisted he'd flown across the sky on a great round disk, passing over palaces, temples, even oceans. He described glowing paths, doors in the air, and something he called sky mirrors, stacked in layers like lacquer trays. His parents said he was just sleep deprived. Taoist monks, however, offered him tea and asked him to draw everything. His drawings, circles, rings, something suspiciously similar to modern diagrams of saucers. Coincidence? Probably. But then again, who's to say what the moon looked like to a child with an overactive imagination and a heavy dose of starlight? There's another tale, this one from the archives of a minor court astronomer, describing an event in 211 CE where the moon split for the length of 5 breaths, then seamed itself closed again. At the time, the record was taken as symbolic. The empire was coming apart, then reforming. But in the margins, someone scribbled, "Witness reports object, not cloud, passed in front, too fast to be star." Okay, we're not saying it was aliens, but it might have been aliens. Still, the moon mirror theory held strong. It was a safe way to explain anomalies. If the moon shimmered, cracked, or dimmed, it wasn't because something flew by. It was because the mirror reflected something changing. Political unrest? Shadow on the moon. Massive war about to break out? Moon glows too bright, revealing secrets. Or alternatively, someone just finally cleaned their mirror after 3 dynasties of smudges. Some Taoist texts go even further. One ancient cosmology scroll suggests that the moon is a device of perception, with a surface both convex and concealed. Read that again. Device of perception, like a tool, like a piece of technology. The scroll also refers to lenses carved from stillness, aligned with heaven's intention, which sounds poetic until you realize it's weirdly close to how we describe optical arrays today. Just saying. There's even mention of a silver visitor who lived on the convex moon in a handful of strange Yuan dynasty folk tales. He, or it, was said to glow faintly and appear only on nights when dogs refuse to bark, which, let's face it, is prime ghost UFO crossover territory. Historians are cautious. They say these are allegories, confused astronomical records, transcription errors, and they're probably right. Probably. But you're lying there now, watching that same pale disk, and for a moment, it really does seem to pulse. Not flash, not beam, just adjust. You shake your head. It's a mirror, remember? Just a bronze mirror in the sky, catching the light of the sun and reflecting your own tired thoughts back at you. Still, part of you wonders, what if it's a little more than that? What if it's not just reflecting you, but watching you too? You won't get an answer tonight, but the moon just blinked again. The moon, steady and smug, hangs above like it's been waiting for this moment. The moment when you finally ask, what's the deal with the rabbit? Because let's be honest, once you stop seeing the moon as just a rock or a mirror or a mysterious UFO surveillance dish and start really looking, it does kind of look like there's something in it, something furry. Welcome to the Jade Rabbit theory. It's not modern, it's not niche, it's ancient, widespread, and adorable. And no, the moon isn't made of cheese, but it may be host to an immortal rabbit pounding herbs in a celestial mortar like the most overachieving lunar pharmacist in all of mythdom. You blink up at the sky, and if you know how to squint just right, those grayish patches in the moon's face start to resemble ears, a rounded back, a set of paws. You're seeing what millions across East Asia have seen for over 2,000 years, the outline of the jade rabbit. And unlike Changi, who floats lonely and wistful through folklore, the rabbit is busy. Let's rewind again. In some of the oldest Taoist and Buddhist texts, the rabbit isn't just there for company, it's working. The most common belief? The rabbit is grinding the elixir of immortality in its mortar. Night after night, herb after cosmic herb, it crushes away in eternal labor. You have to admit, immortality doesn't come cheap. But not everyone agrees on what exactly the rabbit's making. Some fringe interpretations say it's actually mixing up moonlight-infused remedies to cure earthly illnesses. Others think it's preparing dream dust distributed silently to sleeping mortals. One theory, definitely the weirdest, suggests the rabbit is refining negative karma, pounding bad decisions into usable stardust, the celestial version of recycling. Historians still argue whether the jade rabbit originated from Chinese sources or if the legend drifted in from Indian or Central Asian influences along ancient trade routes. What's fascinating is how often rabbits show up in lunar myths across cultures. Japanese, Vietnamese, even Aztec traditions feature similar stories. It seems the moon just screams rabbit to the human subconscious. But in China, the jade rabbit stuck, hopping neatly into poems, prayers, and mid-autumn lantern designs. During moon festivals, families would bake moon cakes stamped with rabbits, kids would wear bunny masks, and elders would point out the rabbit's outline on the moon to anyone who hadn't seen it yet, which was usually just the dog. Because let's be real, that thing's right there. You wander into a scholar's courtyard during one of these festivals. Paper lanterns sway gently in the breeze, and a large bronze mirror has been placed at the center, tilted upward to catch the full moon. Guests take turns peering into it, not to see themselves, but to see if the reflection sharpens the rabbit's outline. It's not superstition. It's part game, part meditation, part social commentary. A clear rabbit means a clear conscience, one old man mutters between sips of plum wine. Some scholars went so far as to classify the rabbit's posture by moon phase. During waxing moons, the rabbit appears to lean forward, ambitious, industrious. At waning moons, it reclines, tired, reflective, possibly regretting all those immortality herbs. On cloudy nights, he disappears entirely, which was sometimes read as a warning. The jade rabbit hides when dishonesty spreads, one Confucian poet wrote, with maximum dramatic flair. Meanwhile, the bronze mirror metaphor gets a rabbit-sized upgrade. A few quirky astrologers once theorized that the moon wasn't just a mirror, but a rabbit-operated mirror. That's right. The rabbit wasn't symbolic. He was in charge. He adjusted brightness, clarity, and orientation like a celestial lighting technician. A minor god of reflection, adorable, yet authoritative. You stand beneath the moon now, trying to picture it. A tiny translucent rabbit with rolled up sleeves and an herbalist's apron, adjusting the light on your inner turmoil. He squints. He stirs the mortar. He nods. Yes, yes. Your guilt about that thing you said 3 years ago is just visible enough now. Perfect. One delightful but deeply unverified tale tells of a mystic who once claimed the rabbit spoke to him. Not in words, of course. In moonlight flashes, Morse code style pulses that, when meditated upon correctly, revealed a recipe for inner peace, or possibly a really good noodle broth. Either way, he was calm afterward. And the art. Oh, the art. Ancient Chinese bronze mirrors sometimes featured rabbits etched into the back, leaping, crouching, grinding herbs. These weren't decorative touches. They were reminders. Reflections had a guardian. If the moon was your soul's mirror, the jade rabbit was the quiet pharmacist, making sure the image stayed clear. You spot a scroll along one scholar's wall detailing lunar phases and rabbit influence. Under first quarter, it says, ambition swells. Begin projects. The rabbit's tail glows. Under full moon, balance is ripe. The rabbit rests. Do not overreach. It reads like a horoscope, but with more fur. There's even a fringe belief, because of course there is, that the rabbit occasionally swaps places with Chang'e, so she can nap while he handles moon duties. He takes the pestle, one legend goes, and she dons his ears. There's a lesson in there somewhere, possibly about work-life balance or long-distance relationships. Tonight, though, you just stare. And sure enough, there he is, tucked into the light and shadow, right where he's always been, pounding away in silent devotion. You wonder what he's working on. A cure? A reminder? A little moonlight seasoning to sprinkle into your dreams? You won't know until morning. But for now, you lie still and let the rabbit do his work. The sky is quiet now, almost too quiet. The moon glows steady and certain until suddenly it doesn't. You blink, look again. It's gone. No, really, the moon is not there. For a terrifying moment, the heavens feel wrong, unmoored, like someone's stolen the clasp off the necklace of night, and now the stars are just spilling everywhere. But this, strange as it seems, wasn't just your dream logic kicking in, because in the annals of ancient China, there were nights when the moon disappeared. These weren't just regular new moons. Those were expected. These were abnormal vanishings, documented with nervous brushstrokes in palace, archives, provincial diaries, and naturally, lots and lots of poems. One account from the Eastern Han period simply reads, "Moon absent on its rightful night, fires lit, offerings given, eyes stayed low." You imagine the confusion. Astrologers pacing back and forth across tiled courtyards, checking their shadow clocks, recalibrating star charts. It should be there. The bronze mirror is gone. Panic, but in robes. Historians still argue whether these disappearances were caused by cloud cover, volcanic ash in the atmosphere, or even early observations of eclipses misunderstood by the recorders. But to people of the time, it wasn't a natural event. It was a celestial malfunction. The heavenly mirror had been turned around, or worse, taken. And if the moon was missing, well, that had implications, serious ones. Some believed the moon was the soul of order, a glowing symbol of virtue. If it vanished, it meant a spiritual gap had opened between heaven and earth, an emperor's sin, a broken ancestral pact, or maybe just too many people skipping incense duty. You know who you are. In one peculiar legend, a village elder insisted that the moon had been borrowed by the ocean. That night, the tides were particularly wild and the sea foamed silver under starlight. "It is washing the moon," he told the villagers, "to cleanse it of all that has been seen." Honestly, not the worst explanation. Would explain a lot of ghost stories. Meanwhile, certain Taoist scrolls spin it differently. One treatise claims the moon does not vanish. It turns, like a mirror flipping to its matte side, a non-reflective phase during which it absorbs energy instead of casting it. Think of it as the moon's monthly me time, a skincare break from reflecting your nonsense. Quirkier still, a small sect believed that the moon was punctual, not permanent, that it was delivered each month by invisible heavenly servants, like an interstellar mail route. And when the moon didn't arrive, delivery error, cosmic courier lost in traffic. You laugh, but there's a recorded prayer asking the Jade Emperor to not misplace the bronze again. In some texts, the missing moon is a test. If you continue your offerings, your meditations, your quiet reverence in its absence, you prove your worth. If you throw a tantrum and storm off to bed without so much as lighting an incense stick, well, the heavens take notes. And don't think this was just a temple thing. Regular people freaked out too. Farmers relied on moon phases to guide planting, harvesting, even social events like weddings or family gatherings. No moon, no schedule. You might as well cancel the rice wine. In one old folk story, a groom arrived at his own wedding only to find the bride's family refusing to open the door. "The moon is gone," her father said, "and with it, clarity. Come back when it returns." Cold, but poetic. That story ends with the moon reappearing the next night, brighter than ever. The wedding goes on, the rice wine flows, and the moral, patience. The mirror turns back when you're ready to see yourself again. Of course, a few fringe thinkers took a different approach. One scholar proposed that the moon didn't disappear. It simply hid from view when it became overwhelmed by human emotion. Too much sadness, too many unspoken things, he wrote. It lowers its face like a shy child. Another suggested the moon had an opposite twin, a dark bronze mirror, invisible, that briefly took its place during these vanishings. A cosmic swap. You lie back and consider that. Two mirrors, one bright, one shadowed, flipping places like theater masks, not just to reflect you, but to balance you. When one is too much, too revealing, too overwhelming, The other steps in, quiet, cool, non-judgmental. You wonder if you've ever had a night like that yourself. A turning inward night, a no-reflection night. Maybe the moon knows how that feels too. Then there are the poets, of course. Always the poets. They turned the missing moon into metaphor. One wrote, "She hides not out of spite, but mercy. Too bright she burns. So she grants us rest from watching ourselves." Another lamented, "Without her, the sky is unthreaded silk, sagging over the bones of stars." You can almost hear the tea sloshing sadly in their cups. But in time, the moon always returned. Slowly, softly, a sliver, a blink, a hesitant gleam, the heavenly mirror finding its face again. And with it, balance returned to the world below. You glance up now. The moon is back. No longer absent, no longer turned, just glowing, just watching. And for tonight at least, it promises to stay. Unless, of course, it's just letting you borrow its reflection for a little while longer. The night deepens into its velvet hush, and you're walking now along a stone path barely lit by moonlight. The world is silver-edged, still, but the silence isn't empty. It's observant. The moon, like always, is there, not looming, not glowing, just remembering. Because in one curious corner of ancient Chinese philosophy, the moon wasn't just a mirror or a goddess or a light switch with mood issues. It was something far more peculiar and oddly personal. It was Earth's rearview mirror. Stay with me. You're not cruising down a celestial highway, but the metaphor checks out. Just as your car's rear view shows what's behind you, not always clearly, not always pleasantly, the moon, in these philosophies, held reflections of things past, choices, deeds, karma, everything you forgot to apologize for, and the occasional moment of grace that made the heavens blink twice. It started in part with Taoist scholars who viewed the cosmos as a living system of loops and echoes. Actions made ripples. Those ripples bounced upward. And the moon? That was where they collected. A gentle, glowing storage drive for memory, specifically your moral memory. Confucian thinkers didn't exactly disagree. They believed the moon reflected virtue. You could literally judge the moral state of the realm, or of yourself, by the way the moon looked. Bright, centered, serene. Someone's been practicing good governance and filial piety. Dim, lopsided, weird aura. Someone skipped ancestor worship again. There's a line in a late Ming text that reads, "The moon knows what you forgot to confess." That's the ancient Chinese version of clear your browser history. You shiver a little. And here's where it gets both hilarious and slightly unsettling. Some aristocrats, totally on board with this moon as rear view concept, began curating their reflections. They'd hold moon viewing parties, yes, but not just for fun. They'd perform small acts of kindness, donate food, sponsor festivals, release turtles, and then, that same night, go outside and check the moon. If it seemed smoother, more brilliant, they'd nod with satisfaction. The moon had noted their virtue, very public-spirited of them, very humble brag. Of course, this led to some performative lunar virtue. One merchant donated rice during a famine specifically to impress the moon. He even wrote a poem about it. It ends with, "Behold, O mirror of the sky, I too am polished." Subtle. A few moon watchers took things further. They believed that if you looked into a polished bronze mirror while gazing at the moon's reflection, you could see your past lives shimmer faintly in the corners. Not the juicy details. No, you were a goat farmer in 403 BCE. Just moods, shadows, moral tendencies. Were you generous? Petty? Inclined to steal sweet buns? The moon remembered. You're holding such a mirror now, its surface catching both the real moon and the reflected one in the mirror pool. For a split second, you think you see something move, not on the moon itself, but in the space between its reflections. Like memory doesn't sit still, like it's drifting quietly from phase to phase. There's a lesser-known scroll that describes the moon as the archive of dreams and deeds. Not quite a god, not quite a judge, just a cosmic filing cabinet with a soft glow. It didn't punish, it just recorded. And over time, the weight of what it saw was reflected back into the world, in weather, in chance, in sudden bursts of luck or the slow drizzle of karma. One village tradition had people write regrets on paper slips and burn them during full moons, believing the smoke would rise and blur the record. You can almost imagine the moon squinting as the smoke curls upward. Was that skipping temple duty or burning midnight tofu oil again? Hard to say. A particularly quirky belief from the Song dynasty held that if you wanted the moon to forget something, really forget it, you had to bury a polished mirror in the ground and never look into it again. Kind of like ghosting your own conscience. You're not sure if it worked, but the story of a nobleman who did this and still had dreams of moonlight scolding him is oddly comforting. The moon, quiet but petty. And yes, poets ran with this. One wrote, "I turned from her silver face, but she turned not from mine. She has kept the ache of my words beneath her soft armor." Another, "All sins, when held too long, form craters in her skin." Deep stuff, also mildly accusatory. Historians still debate whether this rear-view mirror concept was a true doctrinal belief or more of a poetic framework for understanding fate. Either way, it gained traction. Moon cycles became metaphors for cycles of behavior. A full moon, culmination, accountability. A new moon, a fresh start, a clean slate in the sky. And then there's you. You're lying back now, staring upward. And you start to wonder, what would your rear-view moon look like tonight? What little acts has it gathered? What secrets sit quietly in the glow? You feel its gaze, not harsh, not judgmental, just observant. A steady, gentle mirror that never turns away. Maybe that's the real gift of the moon. Not its brightness, not its mystery, but its patience. Its slow, silent promise to hold your past without rushing your future. So rest easy. The moon remembers, but it also forgives. The moon hangs quiet, round as ever. But tonight, it's not gazing back with mystery or memories. Tonight, it's judging you. Okay, not you specifically. But if you were an ancient Chinese moralist, you'd be absolutely convinced that the moon's glow had everything to do with the state of your soul hygiene. You'd probably be scrubbing your virtue like it was laundry day in the cosmos. This was the age when philosophy leaned hard into metaphor, and personal ethics were as visible, supposedly, as your own face in the mirror. And since the moon was the heavenly mirror, it wasn't enough to look at it. It looked right back at you. If you stared into its glowing disk and felt a little nervous, that wasn't indigestion. That was your conscience knocking. Imagine standing in your courtyard, moonlight falling across your robe, and knowing that it's not just illuminating your yard, it's evaluating your character. That was the vibe. A popular belief during the later Han and into the Tang period was that a clean soul meant a clearer moon. Not metaphorically, physically. If the moon seemed dim or clouded, The people believed it was because something was off in the human realm. Too much corruption, too many grudges, a kingdom slipping morally sideways. And yes, it could also be your fault. You turn slowly now, as if the moon might be narrowing its eyes at you. This idea wasn't just a household superstition. It was official moral theory in some circles. Philosophers wrote essays on moon purity, equating lunar brightness with personal cultivation. Did you honor your parents this month? Did you refrain from unnecessary gossip? Did you return your neighbor's donkey and not pretend you didn't know where it wandered off to? Good. You'll enjoy a bright, well-defined moon. Congratulations. Skip a few of those boxes, though. The moon grows hazy, pale, maybe a little lopsided. That wasn't an atmospheric effect. It was your virtue streaking like a cheap mascara under heaven's all-seeing light. One emperor even issued a decree that all officials were to renew their personal purity before the mid-autumn moon, so as not to cast dust upon the heavenly reflection. What that meant in practice, probably ritual baths, heartfelt apologies, and a lot of anxious side eyes toward the sky. Here's a quirky little ritual from a mountain village outside Chengdu. On the night of the full moon, the elders would pour water into a polished bronze basin, set it on the highest rooftop, and invite everyone to look into it. Not to admire their own faces, but to see how clearly the moon appeared in the reflection. The brighter and crisper the image, the more clear-hearted the household was considered to be. If your moon came out murky, you had some explaining to do, possibly involving that rice loan you said you forgot about. Some scholars proposed that the moon's reflective light wasn't just light. It was a spiritual test beam, a soft lunar X-ray of the soul. And if you stood in moonlight after a particularly selfish week, it would feel heavier, stickier, less glowing. Historians still argue whether these descriptions were spiritual metaphors or just people realizing that guilt changes how you feel in the dark. Even poets got nervously philosophical. One Tang poet wrote, "I dared to meet the moon tonight, though my deeds are not newly washed." Another observed, "The moon casts no shadow from my heart. Does that mean I've none to cast?" That's the kind of line that makes you pour yourself a cup of tea and rethink every argument you've had in the past decade. But don't worry, it wasn't all gloom and guilt. The other side of this lunar morality scale was aspiration. If you believed that the moon grew brighter with virtue, then you had a very literal incentive to be a better person. Want a radiant moon? Be a radiant human. Practice kindness. Practice honesty. Even if no one else sees it, the moon does. And that gave rise to another delightful practice, moon vows. People would whisper their resolutions, not out loud, not to another person, but to the moon. Promises made in moonlight were considered binding. Why? Because the mirror would remember. There's a sweet tale of two young lovers who stood under the full moon, made vows of loyalty, and then exchanged small bronze mirrors etched with each other's initials. They believed that every time the moon rose and shone upon those mirrors, it would remind heaven of their oath. Call it romantic. Call it terrifying. Either way, the moon became your accountability partner. One especially quirky idea from a fringe Taoist sect held that if you told the moon your confession while holding a freshly cleaned bronze mirror, the light would burn away the stain on your spirit. kind of like cosmic dry cleaning. You just had to really mean it, and definitely avoid eating garlic beforehand. Not for spiritual reasons, just, for courtesy. So now, lying beneath the moon's glow, you find yourself wondering, how have you lived this month? Not just what you've done, but who you've been when no one was watching. Except, of course, for that slow-turning, always glowing, utterly unblinking mirror in the sky. It doesn't speak. It doesn't judge. It simply shines. And in its light, the truth of you gently emerges. The mirror is yours, but the clarity, that's on you. The moon's out again, glowing bright like a fresh page, except tonight, it feels more like a protest sign. Subtle, poetic, but firm. Because once upon a dynasty or three, not everyone saw the moon as just a tool for reflection or soul-checking. No, for some, it became a sly way to talk about things you weren't supposed to say out loud. Enter the rebels, the poets, the dreamers with ink-stained sleeves and eyes that saw a little too much. In ancient China, where open political critique could get you banished, imprisoned, or gently stabbed with an ornamental hairpin, moon metaphors were a life-saving loophole. You're in the shadowed corner of a scholar's study now. The lanterns are dim, the windows open, and by moonlight, he dips his brush and begins to write. Not just poetry, but protest. Not that he'll ever call it that. No, his words will be about the moon, the changing moon, the hidden moon, the divided moon. You see, by talking about the moon, these thinkers could talk about everything. Its phases reflected cycles of power, its glow mirrored transparency, or the lack thereof. A dim moon might suggest a ruler who had lost his way. A waxing moon could be hope. A waning one? Decline. And if the moon was missing altogether, well, that was revolution, knocking very politely at the back door of your poem. One well-known poet wrote, "The moon rose late, behind veils of smoke. It no longer smiled upon the court." Now to a casual reader, weather report, but to anyone paying attention, that was a coded message. The emperor's rule had lost the mandate of heaven. Of course, historians still argue whether certain moon poems were truly rebellious or just heartbreak over lost love. But let's be real. Ancient poets rarely wasted a good metaphor. If the moon was sad, someone powerful was doing something dumb. Some of these verses spread quietly, copied into calligraphy manuals, painted onto fans, hidden in the margins of accounting ledgers. Others were performed under the stars in private gatherings, where listeners would nod slowly, sipping wine with the exact amount of caution required for surviving the Yarsasei night. One poem became infamous during the Tang Dynasty. It described the moon cracked like a clay bowl, its pieces swept behind banners. That image traveled, whispered, eventually banned, but never forgotten. You walk through an artist's studio now, where a painting hangs in moonlight. It shows a full moon, but not in the sky. Instead, it floats upside down in a pond, rippling. Above it, nothing but clouds. The message: the truth is out there, but distorted, reflected, not revealed. A masterful use of visual metaphor, and a pretty clear critique of government censorship. Then there were the rebels in robe sleeves who didn't even bother with subtlety. One rogue monk, disillusioned with both court politics and temple hierarchies, declared in a chant, "The moon watches all, but answers none. She reflects, but does not weep. Let us be like her, untouchable, silent, ever present." He was promptly removed from his post and reassigned to a remote mountaintop with no ink. Still, his chant became popular among hermits, wanderers, and frustrated exam candidates. To them, the moon wasn't just a metaphor. It was a symbol of enduring truth in a world where truths were negotiable. Even the act of viewing the moon became political. Certain scholars held private moon salons where guests would read censored texts aloud under moonlight, believing that what was said beneath the sky's own mirror was safer somehow. The moon, they claimed, didn't gossip. Quirk alert. Some believe that if you carved your thoughts onto a piece of paper and left it overnight in moonlight, the moon would absorb your message and share it only with those worthy to understand it. Early lunar social media? Maybe. Highly impractical? Definitely. But there's beauty in the belief. A sense that somewhere up above, truth was being held gently, even when no one dared speak it down here. One radical poet went a step further. He claimed that when tyrants ruled, the moon's reflection in water would flicker and split, unable to rest. He traveled village to village during a period of unrest, performing moon poems in exchange for soup and shelter. People said the moon followed him, that it always rose earlier in the towns he visited. Was that true? Probably not. Did it matter? Not at all. The moon had become more than a mirror. It was resistance, a silver circle that couldn't be censored, a round, silent face too high for knives. You lie back and the moon stares down, peaceful. But now you see it differently. Not just as a reflector of feelings or a memory bank, but as a witness to everything. Not swayed by power, not corrupted by gold or fear. Just there, watching the rise and fall of dynasties, the scribbles of students, the quiet sighs of people who wished they could say more. And maybe that's the moon's greatest gift. In a world of noise and rules and shouting, it offers quiet rebellion. Soft light that says, I see you. I won't stop you. I won't speak, but I will remember. And somehow, that's enough. The sky is still, and so is the moon, perfectly round, perfectly quiet, glowing like it always has. But tonight, you feel the change. Not in the moon itself, but in the stories, the beliefs, the long echo of bronze fading gently into silence. Because now we've reached the twilight of the moon as mirror theory, the last flickers of a worldview that once polished heaven's face with metaphor and myth. It doesn't vanish suddenly. It doesn't shatter. It just dims, fades, like the edge of a dream slipping through your fingers. You're sitting in a study now, but it's not lined with bamboo scrolls anymore. It's packed with lenses, charts, and brass instruments. The mirror has become a telescope. The reflection, now a measurement. What was once interpreted with intuition and incense is now calculated with degrees and logarithms. It's the 17th century. Western science is beginning to slip into China through trade routes and Jesuit missionaries. The moon is being redrawn, no longer as a polished disk, but as a rocky sphere with topography, craters, highlands, shadows not of emotion, but of angles. You turn the pages of a Ming Dynasty astronomy manual and see something startling, a diagram of the moon, sketched with not just beauty, but geometry. No poems, no phoenixes, just numbers. Suddenly the heavenly mirror is being audited, and the response? Mixed. Some welcome the change. One scholar wrote, though the moon is not a mirror, it reflects a new kind of understanding. Others resisted. To reduce her to stone is to forget she once spoke to us, lamented a poet of the late Qing. Still, the bronze mirror theory didn't vanish overnight. People continued to gaze at the moon as a moral compass, a memory keeper, a cosmic witness. Festivals still lit up the sky with lanterns. Moon cakes were still stamped with rabbits. And yes, some stubborn poets still left their regrets folded beneath moonlit trees, whispering old promises to an ancient sky. One old woman, interviewed by a curious scholar in the 1930s, insisted that her grandmother taught her the moon was a polished disk, cleaned every night by the goddess Chang'e and her rabbit assistant. "Why would you want it to be rock?" she scoffed. "Rock doesn't care what you've done, a mirror does." Quirky as ever, one rogue astrologer in the Republican period tried to revive the mirror idea by claiming the moon was a sphere, but coated in bronze. "That's why it shines," he argued in a self-published pamphlet. Not because of sunlight, but memory. His following? Small, but enthusiastic. Meanwhile, modern astronomers, equipped with lunar probes and actual moon rocks, insist there is no bronze, no polish, no soul scanning, just regolith and silence. And yet, even today, when you step outside and look up, what do you feel? Not stone, not science, but something reflective. The moon still feels like it's gazing back, still glowing with stories, still waiting to hear yours. Historians note that many of these older beliefs didn't truly disappear. They folded, became metaphor, became art. The moon is no longer thought of as a literal mirror by most, but its role as a symbol endures, a metaphor too powerful to discard entirely. Because in the end, we didn't stop needing the moon to reflect us. We just changed what we asked it to show. You lie back for the last time tonight, the cool air brushing your face. Above you, the moon holds its place, steady, round, a quiet reservoir of everything you've just learned. The rabbit still hops in the shadows. Chang'e still watches from the glow. The mirror is quieter now, but it's never truly gone. It's just waiting for you to look again. So now the stories slow, the metaphors soften, the moon stays, but the night folds its arms around you a little tighter. You've wandered through temples and scrolls, through shadows and silver light, and every step brought you closer to something both distant and strangely personal. The ancient mirror in the sky, whether made of bronze or not, still hovers above your world, patient and unchanged. It doesn't ask anything of you. It doesn't rush you to believe. It simply remains, reflecting, remembering, and perhaps forgiving. You've met old scholars and wandering poets, quiet monks and anxious tax officials. You've walked under moons that blink, vanish, crack, and return. You've heard the rabbit stirring his mortar, the soft voice of Chang'e in the dark, and the whisper of your own past curling beneath moonlight. Now let those stories drift to the edge of your thoughts. Let them dissolve like fog in early dawn. Let your breath slow. Let your shoulders soften. Let the light of the moon glow behind your closed eyelids, not as a judge or a twin or a spy, but simply as a reminder that you are part of a story that's far older than memory, and that somewhere above you, whether through bronze or cloud or dream, the moon still turns. Polished or pale, full or gone, it's still there. And it's watching over you even now. Good night, traveler of soft myths and slow light. Sleep well.